Hi, everybody. It's Valerie again with the US Canada portion of Meant to Be Well, day 2. And I am thrilled to have my fourth speaker of the day today, Yalda Kazemi. And Yalda is incredible, and I'm so excited to have her with us. Let me share with you a little bit about Yalda and her background. So, Yalda is joining us from Canada, and Yalda is a speaker, author, and mental health advocate educator aiming to shift perspectives and raise awareness about realities of mental illness and foster a culture of well being on an individual, family, workplace, and community level. Yalda has personal experience overcoming severe postpartum mental illness. This led to her mission to be a voice for those who suffer in silence and to raise awareness and break stigmas associated with mental illness. And she will be talking with us today on changing perspectives about mental health. And I am so thrilled to have her with us. So thank you so much, Yalda.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Thank you for this amazing summit and organizing this and bringing so many impactful, thought provoking individuals together. And for anyone who's tuning in, thank you for being open to learning and just hearing these amazing conversations today.
Oh, thank you so much. You are amazing and so inspirational. Yalda, tell us about your mission. Tell us about your story. I would love for others to hear about why you do what you do and how important all of this is.
Absolutely. So I'll give the quick Coles Notes version of it. Obviously, it's a little more in depth than what I'm going to share today, but mainly my mission is to be a voice for those who are suffering in silence, because I understand there are a lot of misconceptions around mental health, stigmas, judgments that still take place, even though the conversations have quite dramatically changed from when I experienced my postpartum mental illness 11 years ago. But I still think it's just really important to be an advocate and to raise awareness and educate people, especially in some of the areas of mental health, particularly the subset of postpartum and perinatal. Now we're also seeing more around perimenopause and menopause, but I think it's really important to have these conversations so people know the realities of what these subsects of mental illness entail, and can not only help themselves, it can be a source of support for others as well. And so a little background about my story is I never had a mental illness in my life before, never experienced any sort of mental illness, although I knew individuals with a mental illness. I've had family members who had either anxiety or depression, things like that. And it really wasn't until 2013 when I had my son, and he was born, where I just immediately in the operating room knew something wasn't right. I remember when they put my son on my chest, and my then husband at the time was behind me. He was beaming with joy. He was excited and elated. And I just kind of looked empty, and I looked like I feel nothing. I feel no joy, no happiness. I feel no connection. I feel nothing. And I brought that to the attention of the nurse who was wheeling me out to the recovery room. And I said, I don't feel any happiness or joy. Like, I don't feel anything towards this child. And she said, it's okay. It's not like you see in the movies and things where people are overjoyed right away. It takes some time, and it might take a little bit of time for those feelings to come. So I kind of let it go, and we brushed it off. But honestly, inside, I knew something just didn't feel right with me. And in hindsight, when I look back, as I've obviously learned more about these particular subsets of mental health, I do understand that I most likely had perinatal depression as well. And I just didn't know, right? It went undiagnosed. And so after my son was born, obviously a lot of women will go through the baby blues where their mood is low for a bit, and then that eventually subsides. But mine didn't subside. The low mood kept going further and further, a lot more depression, just sadness, a disconnect. I consistently kept saying, I don't feel the love and connection towards this child. And as a mother, you're conditioned that moms have to love their kids more than anyone. So how horrible do you feel as a human being when you're articulating those words and saying, I don't feel the love towards my child. What's wrong with me? Is something wrong? What's going on? Why don't I feel these emotions? And my sadness got worse. And long story short, by about 6 weeks, I went for a maternity clinic follow-up, and they diagnosed me with postpartum depression and gave me SSRIs. And I'll first preface this in saying I am not a medical professional. I'm not a doctor or anything. So I don't talk about whether people do or don't need medication. I always tell people that's a conversation between you and your healthcare professional. But in my story, I was given the medication, and I remember very much thinking to myself, I don't want to have the diagnosis of depression. I don't want to be labeled as someone with depression. No, I don't have depression. And I most certainly don't want to take medication. I'm strong enough to fight this on my own. I don't need meds. And so that judgment and criticism was already in my own head from the start. And I was really unwell. So eventually I did take the medication. And however, I ended up having an adverse reaction to one of the most commonly prescribed. And so and this is not very common, but it happened to me. And so from there, my depressive symptoms got worse, but then I started to get really bad anxiety symptoms as well. And so my anxiety just went through the roof. And then it became months of trying to find the right medication, something that could help me sleep, something that could help the symptoms. And from then on, it went on until about 6 months. My son was almost 6 months old. We went on a family trip. And they thought they'd give me a massage and I could relax while everybody else was at the pool, and my mom was at the pool with my son. And during the massage, I suddenly had a thought that I need to kill him. And I remember just the sheer fear within me that what just happened? Why did I have that thought? Where did that come from? What's going on? And at this point, I had for a while started dissociating from reality as well. And so I used to walk around and pinch people's arms like this to be like, are you real? Is everybody real? Am I real? Is this world real? Like I was having a lot of delusions about reality. And so, it really scared me that I had this thought come and I didn't know where it came from. And obviously my entire family tried to calm me down on this trip and just reassure me that I haven't hurt him. He's fine. Fast forward to a week later, came back to our house from our trip, and I was at my mom's house changing his diaper on a change pad on her carpet. And as I got up to throw away the diaper, I suddenly had a thought that I need to crush his skull with my foot. And this time I actually raised my foot to do so. And I don't know how. I don't know how my body just did it. It's not like I willingly wanted to do it. My body literally, I raised my foot and hovered it over his head. And just before I lowered it to crush his head, I suddenly stopped myself and I thought, what is happening? What am I doing? How did I just move my leg without even realizing this? And I just screamed for my mom, and my mom just ran and was like, what's happening? I'm like, you got to take him away from me. You got to take him away, and you need to take me to the hospital. Something is not right. I'm not getting better. I'm getting worse. This time the thought wasn't just a thought, like I'm losing control of my body as well. And you have to take him away. I don't care if I don't see him again. I'm not going to kill him. And I will if you don't take me away. And so I went and I asked to be hospitalized. I was in a psych ward for about 3 weeks. They redid all the medications and things like that because I had developed psychosis symptoms and things. And from then on, I was at the hospital for 3 weeks, eventually got better. The psychosis kind of symptoms subsided. And it took me a good 2 years after that to, finally be myself again, be completely off medication again. And as a result of that, I learned a lot from that experience. I learned how much lack of knowledge there is out there. I learned how much stigmatization there is out there. So during COVID, I decided I want to write a book about this, and I want to really put the realities of postpartum out there, but also to not just share my story in depth and get into the nitty-gritty detail of what can happen, but not to scare people, but to educate them. So if they are experiencing it, or if someone else around them is going through something, whether minor or severe like mine, they know the signs to look for. They know the things to do to get help. And so that's really where a lot of the advocacy for me comes from, is that personal experience in wanting the experience, not only for moms going through postpartum, but their families, their partners, their network, their friends who are also feeling lost in that experience, to know what to do. So it's, the book is kind of like a self-help guide / memoir to help all these individuals. And so that's kind of where I'm at now with this. And and obviously there's things that I've learned from it. And if everybody's okay with it, I'd love to share some of the knowledge that I learned, some of the things I cover in my book, but also just to share with everyone ways in which we can change our perceptions around mental illness.
Yes, please do.
Yeah. So one of the first things is obviously the misconception that mental illness only happens to certain individuals, right? So typically, individuals are viewed as lazy or unmotivated, maybe uneducated, lower socioeconomic status, people from certain lifestyle choices, certain ethnicities. And I'm really here to say there is no specific face to mental illness. It can happen to anyone. You cannot look at somebody and assume they have a mental illness, or look at somebody and assume they don't. And so that judgment needs to stop, because it can really happen to people from all walks of life. The other really important part, I think, about the negative perceptions of mental illness is before we try to change the negative perceptions of others, we need to change our own internal perceptions of it. And I say that from experience because, as I said, when I got the diagnosis, when I was given the medication, I thought to myself, no way, I don't want to be called depressed. No way, I'm not taking medication. I'm stronger than this. I'm not a weak person. I don't need medication. And so that self-stigmatization and judgment that we hold, because we've been conditioned this way for many years growing up, that mental illness is a bad thing. People who have mental illness, there's something wrong with them. They're scary, and that's just not true. And so for me, I know that the moment I stopped that judgment, that internal stigmatization, is the moment I started to get better, because I was no longer fighting this idea in my mind that something bad is what I have. It's just something that occurred. And so I always tell people, don't focus on the label of having a mental illness diagnosis, because really those are just words. It's only the meaning you attach to that label that has a hold on you. So you can get labeled with whatever diagnosis it might be. It doesn't really have as much of a hold on you unless you allow it to. So change that perception in your own mind, and you will change the way your outcome results are. You will change the way the experience is for you, because it won't be seen as something so bad. The other is, don't focus on the why, focus on the how. So don't focus on why you are going through a mental illness, why something like this has happened to you. And I understand wanting to know why, so maybe you avoid it for next time, or and there's individuals who have a mental illness diagnosis lifelong. So the why really doesn't help you as much as the how. It doesn't matter why you ended up with a mental illness. It's how you deal with it. It's how you approach it. It's how you choose to see it. It's how you do the things that you need to do in order to help yourself get better. Those are the things that matter. It's not so much why it happened. The other one is that mental illness is not a choice. And that's one of the first thing I always talk to people about, is that getting a mental illness isn't a choice, but asking for help is. Being a supportive person towards someone who's experiencing a mental illness and needs your support, that's choice, right? So really seeing it not as a sign of weakness or a sign of somebody doing something to cause themselves to get a mental illness, but really seeing it as a sign of strength and courage, as a sign of resiliency, strong self-awareness and introspection, the ability to have that conversations with ourselves and say, I'm not well, but I need to get help to help myself get better. That's what matters more. It's not a choice. And the most important part is ask for help, because that's where you have control. That's where you have a choice. And advocating for yourself, I think, is the biggest thing. I can say from my own experience, there isn't a person in the world who can convince me that I should be ashamed, that I should be embarrassed, that I should have any sort of guilt from having gone through the experience that I did, through having wanted to harm and take my own child's life. And I dealt with that guilt for a long time until I changed my own perception about it and realized I didn't choose for any of that to happen. So why should I sit there and stigmatize myself, give myself unnecessary guilt and embarrassment and shame for something I didn't choose to have? But what I did choose is to go get help. What I did choose is to ask to be hospitalized, because in my case, I know that's what I needed. And so that's the reason I'm here today. That's the reason my son is alive today. And it's that choice that we can make to advocate for ourselves. And with those internal perceptions comes the concept of unlearning negative behaviors and knowledge that's not serving you. So we're all born not knowing anything. Everything we are, who we are, the way we operate, the way we think is learned behavior. And so the same way we can learn things, we can teach ourselves to unlearn things. So if we've always been conditioned that mental illness is bad, having a diagnosis is bad, you're not going to succeed in life, you're not going to be happy. No, those things are not true. I consider myself quite a happy, successful, thriving individual, and I had a mental illness, and I now again have diagnoses of anxiety as I've gone through perimenopause now. And there's nothing wrong with that. I'm a perfectly functioning human being with a anxiety diagnosis, with an ADHD diagnosis, and it's fine. I'm perfectly fine. And so it's just to remind people that you can unlearn those negative behaviors and thoughts and those negative misconceptions as well. The other thing is be honest with yourself and with your healthcare professionals. So when you are approaching them and saying, I need help, tell them the full extent of your symptoms. I hindered my own well-being by not telling them everything because I was scared. What if I tell them they're going to take my son from me? This is going to happen. My life's going to be negatively impacted. What happens to my job? Things like that. And honestly, the only person that was harmed in that was me. The only thing that happened as a result of not being honest is I suffered for 2.5 years. I didn't need to suffer for that long. I hindered my own well-being as a result of not being honest and as a result of being dismissive of myself and some of my symptoms. And so advocate for yourselves. There may be individuals even in your life that might be dismissive of you. Ignore that. If you know something doesn't feel right, if you know you're not feeling well, if you know you need help, do not be dismissive. Even if everybody around you is dismissive, go seek that help because nobody knows you better than you know yourself. You know internally whether you feel like yourself or not. And another really good lesson was support doesn't always come from the people whom we expect it from the most. Sometimes those closest to us are the ones who are the most unsupportive, are the most dismissive, are the most hurtful in their interactions with us, in what they do or say, and they are hindering our well-being. I'm not saying go start a fight with everybody, not at all, but I'm saying distance yourselves where you can from the individuals that are dismissive. And yes, it kind of feels like you're grieving a loss when people, the closest to you, aren't showing up for you. People you expected would be there for you during hardship aren't showing up for you. So it's kind of like grieving a loss. And absolutely, take a little bit of time to grieve that, but don't sit there and dwell in it for too long. Because one thing I learned from my experience is at the time while I was so focused on the ones that let me down and didn't show up, my eyes weren't open to the ones that unexpectedly did come into my life and help me. Friends whom were more distant friends, but then they're the ones that checked in on me every day. They're the ones that helped me through the process. Whereas my, for example, best friend of 15 years was nowhere to be found. And so focus on the ones that show up because that will help you foster new relationships. That will help you have that support and bond that you need to get better. And really, at the end of the day, this is why I say it's all about our perceptions. It's all about our perceptions and how we choose to see having a mental illness. It's in our perceptions of whom we choose to see as a source of support. And if we choose to see, not the ones that don't show up, but the ones that do, then the process is a lot better for us, right? It's how we choose to unlearn those negative stigmas and all of that. And really, I always say in every session I ever talk is there are benefits to having mental illness. And people kind of look at me like, you're so ridiculous, Yalda, what are you talking about? But there are benefits because there's a lot of things that I learned as a result of going through a mental illness. There are things I learned about myself. There are things I learned about my level of resiliency and strength that I have. I mean, I feel like at this point, nothing can bring me down. If that couldn't take me down, there's nothing else that's going to take me down. And so it gave me this inner strength and this inner, more motivation and ambition than I even had before. And a love for life because this is my second chance at life, and that's what I'm going to do with it. I'm going to take that lesson to do good things with it. It has helped me with my relationships. It has helped me understand who, is really, really there for me and who isn't. And so I've fostered the relationships that are important to me, the relationships that showed up to me. And a lot of the other things is that it really helped me have knowledge and helped me know how to see the signs the next time it should happen. And so that experience, if I had not had it, because I have a schooling background in psychology, I learned theory about, mental illness, of course, not postpartum, but just general anxiety, depression, things like that. And let me tell you, and I'm not dismissive of theory or education or knowledge, I'm a huge proponent of that, but nothing taught me the way lived experience did. None of the knowledge from university even remotely was at the level of lived experience. And so the understanding that I have of this area now, because I've lived it, is so invaluable. Like it's priceless. I can't even explain how much it's helped me, or it allows me now to educate others and help others in my life who ever go through similar experiences. And for me, I can say exactly 10 years after I got my postpartum, this year in about February, March, I suddenly was hit with severe, severe anxiety, almost as severe as my postpartum, again, because I'm in perimenopause right now. And I always knew because of the hormonal fluctuations, I'm at risk of this happening again at this time period. And lo and behold, of course, it hit me. And, I could recognize the signs much faster. And so instead of not feeling like myself and not being well for 2.5 years, this time it was only about 4 months until the right combination of meds were there, until the right things that I did could help me. And so I look at 2.5 years of my life at loss versus only 4 months for me to completely feel like myself again. That is a huge difference. That is a lot of valuable life that I could have, enjoyed and lived. And it's all because of the beautiful gift of having had mental illness during postpartum, that I could do what I needed to save myself and help myself again and put my life back in an order that made me feel like myself. And so at the end of the day, it is really all about how we choose to perceive a mental illness, how we choose to perceive anything in life. You can always find some sort of lesson and positivity in it. And you can always use it to better your life in the future and to just have that gratitude about being able to have the strength to make it through things like this.
Absolutely. Yalda, that perspective is so powerful. I am so proud of you for everything that you are sharing. Is such vulnerable. You are so vulnerable to help other people, to raise awareness, to say that mental illness is not a choice. What you do is a choice to seek out support, and that is just raising awareness for it. I think your story is so powerful and absolutely necessary for us to know. Talk to your doctor. Don't hold back. Talk to your healthcare provider. There's resources out there. Postpartum Support International, postpartum.net, the suicide prevention 988. I know in Canada it's similar, but there's resources, and these are the things that we need to bring out into the open to talk about. And Yalda, I am so proud of you. You are so brave, and thank you so much for sharing all of this information with us and your story with us.
Thank
Now,
you.
absolutely. Now, Yalda, I would love for you to tell our listeners, whoever are watching live or on a replay, where they can find more of you. I have on scrolling on there your website, as well as I put everything in the chat as well. But please let us know where we can find you, where we can find your amazing book, and everything else.
Yeah. So my website, as it is scrolling down here, yaldakazemi.com. That's where you can find me. It kind of talks a little bit about some of the work I do in this space with regards to mental health and resiliency. The link to my book is also there, as well as the title of the book. It's called Unapologetic Truths: The Realities of Postpartum We Don't Talk About. It is available on Amazon. It's available on Kindle, Google Play, Apple Books, all of those resources as well. I believe Barnes and Noble might have it as well in the US. Um, and really, you can feel free to reach out. I have my email on there that individuals can reach out to me at. And yeah, at the end of the day, and the other thing I will say is, although my book is titled with postpartum, because that's my story of what I went through, and that's the subset that I really want to help raise awareness from. I've had many people, including men, who aren't themselves going through, that postpartum. Even though men can have postpartum depression in a different capacity, but I've had a lot of people say that it's not even for postpartum only, and that's exactly how I wrote it. So when you read the first chapter, it's my story, but then it goes to talk about anxiety, depression, any sort of mental illness in general. So the strategies and tips that I talk about in the book, the learnings, the changing misconceptions, changing those perceptions, those really apply to any mental illness. It's not just for people in postpartum. And I intentionally wrote it to be shorter and easy to read, because I understand that when someone is going through anxiety, depression, through any mental illness really, and you're so consumed by it, sometimes you forget things, sometimes you can't remember things. And so I didn't want it to be this book with so much psychology and hard terminology that's hard for people to grasp and to remember. I wanted it to be an easy conversational kind of read, where it's as if I'm talking to you, kind of helping you, guiding you through the process. And like I said, there's a chapter for helpful tips for individuals going through mental illness, as well as a part of the chapter devoted to helpful tips for those in support roles. I also talk about some of the things not to do as a support person, because sometimes people think they're being really helpful with some of the things they say to you, like think positive. That's such a common thing people say. And I explain why that is actually counterproductive and hindering someone's well-being, and how to actually help them think positive without saying those specific words that can actually come across as condescending and dismissing, and make a person feel even worse about themselves and their inability to think positive at that time. And so, yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, it's out there to just help people. It was reviewed by multiple doctors, psychiatrists prior to me putting it out, because of course I never want in any way to inadvertently give any information out that would harm anybody. And again, as I said, I very clearly state I'm not a medical professional. It's just really things that I did for myself to help myself. It's my own journey, and I just share it with people in case they can relate to it, and to also give people a sense of hope, because I want people to know that if I, with the severity of the postpartum that I had, anxiety, depression, psychosis symptoms, some OCD symptoms, with all of those diagnoses, if I am here alive and well today, thriving in life, thank God, anybody else can as well. It's just a matter of getting the right resources, the right support, the right help to help individuals lead a flourishing life, even if they have a mental illness diagnosis. It is not the end all and be all. It is just what you choose to do with it.
Thank you so much, Yalda. That's incredible. Incredible. You're such an inspiration. And thank you again for joining us at Men Should Be Well. And definitely make sure you check out all of Yalda's information, her book. And thank you again for tuning in. And Yalda, I hope you have an incredible day. And thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much. Thank you for everyone who tuned in. Again, thank you to yourself and the entire team that put this amazing summit marathon together. I mean, you are having such an impact on people's lives. Trust that there are individuals out there today whose lives are going to be saved because of this forum and this event. And so what a beautiful feeling to be able to leave, this conversation, and to be able to have this day and know that we are helping to save someone's life.
Yes, absolutely. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Well, I will talk with you soon, Yalda, and have an amazing day. Thanks again. And thank you, everybody. Thank you. Bye.
Bye.